record on both for my computer, but also this should be recorded on Facebook, be able to post it later. As part of the PCA Church Planner group in Facebook, just thought it would be great to begin to hear what are some of the stories from church planters who are in the midst of it, who are just even beginning in the process. Want to hear from each of you about your experiences. And I know, Jay, you just launched last weekend in the midst of it. John, you launched, was it this past fall of 19? Or
That's
a year?
Right, yep.
Yeah, okay, yeah, you're just 6 months
6 months, yep.
Yeah. But anyway, we want to hear from Craig, you as well, hear from each of you. So why don't you just go around, Craig, why don't you start, introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit who you are, where you are, how long you've been at this process, and then we'll get into more of the details as we go along.
Sure, I was hoping to go last, but I can go first.
You're at the top of my screen, so.
Oh, bummer. So my name is Craig. You know, my wife's name is Jen. We have four kids. My daughter's 12 and 3 boys down to 6. So we're planted in Central Washington State in a town called Yakima. It's a town I grew up just outside of it. I've actually been a pastor there before. The closest established PCA church to it is 2 hours away, 2.5 hours away. So it's kind of in the middle of our state. We don't got a lot in the eastern part of the state. We have been working on the church plant there for the past year, meeting monthly. I actually am doing a church planting residency at one of our churches on the other side of the state. And so I've been going out there once a month over this past year. We've been gathering a group of people. And the last time we gathered, we had like 35 people join us. And so it's been a fruitful year of gathering people. That's where we've been. I don't know if you want me to move into what we've done recently, but. Yeah,
no, we'll kind of go around again the second time, and then I'll let you go later then in the order of that.
Great.
All right. Hey, Jay, what's your story, your background?
Well, this is our third church that we've planted. We planted one 17 years ago here in the city of St. Louis. And then 6.5, 7 years ago, we planted another one in Austin, Texas. We're there for, so we were at the first one for 10 years, the second one for about 4.5. Then we came back here to St. Louis. I'm in the middle of doing a Doctor of Ministry degree, and decided we were gonna go for it and plant another church while we were doing that. And so we just really arrived at that decision late last summer, and began fundraising through the fall. I really just did fundraising and through the fall, and we had plans on planting this spring, gathering a core group. We're doing it's a total parachute plant. So there's no sending church per se. We've got several great churches in our presbytery who are helping us out, but it's a total scratch plant. And so that's been a total new adventure. The first 2 were mother-daughter churches. This one, just that alone created a whole new level of complexity. But you had a global pandemic in on that, and the inability to actually meet with people. It makes it a little bit of a challenge, but we've decided to, since it's impossible to gather people now out there, really, we decided just to sort of go for it and utilize an online worship service as a gathering service. And so we're doing lots of social media blitzes and just inviting people, and we started that last Saturday night.
Mm-hmm. John, where are you at, and how's it going up to this point? We'll get into the at this point next. But.
Yeah, so my wife and I, we have 3 kids, 3 girls, 10 to 4. We're from Minnesota, but we're planting a church in Fargo, North Dakota, which is right on the border of Minnesota. And when I was in seminary, that was the joke that M&A used to encourage people to go to the ends of the world for Jesus, is who's going to go to Fargo, North Dakota. And
Ted Powers tried to recruit me there years ago, and I said, "You must hate me if you want me to go there."
Argo.
Yeah, so we've been here not quite 2 years. This summer will be 2 years, and we launched September of 2019. So we've been having weekly worship for about 6 months, and yeah, so we're also a parachute plant, scratch plant. We're very far away from our closest church, 3.5 hours from the closest PCA church. Kind of out here alone, and now I'm very alone in my office. So that's my life each week.
Good. I'll just introduce myself, and we have Paul Hahn joining us as well. But for those of you who don't know, I'm Chris Vogel. Was a planter, started back in '92, came out of a church plant, participated in that one from '87 till '92, and the '92 planted Cornerstone Church outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in Waukesha, and was there for 26 years. Stepped down from there 2 years ago and started a ministry called Next Gen Pastors. And that, and overseeing the On Wisconsin Network, director of that, and doing some other things as well, serving at the behest of the man at the bottom of my screen, Paul Hahn. Paul, if you want to give greetings and say hello. You're muted. 1 second.
That's good.
There you go.
Good thing for me to do to be muted. Hello, Jay Simmons.
Hey, buddy. How are you?
So good to see you. I don't look old enough, but I'm actually Jay's grandmother. So I'm different gender and age, but truly I am. You know.
Paul, you should plant a church right now. And that will aid you quite a bit.
All the cool kids are doing it, yeah.
Well, I say I want to when I can hand this off. So I'll let you come help you when I can hand this off.
Sounds good.
Craig, where are you located again? Tell me, Craig, because I missed that. I'm sorry.
No, that's right. Yeah, we're in Yakima, Washington, which is right in the middle of the state, a couple hours away from the nearest established church, PCA church. So we're also a parachute plant.
Well, these all have that in common. That's great. Yeah. So I've worked in campus ministry with Cru and RUF, and then went and planted the first PCA church in the city limits of Austin, which became the grandmother church for Jay's church, planted Redeemer Church of Austin. It's really fun I've been visited Jay's church a couple of times, and it's fun to see part of the perspective on this. You realize is what Jay ended up planting, years later, which was a granddaughter church, was really more the church that I was starting out to plant in 1994. So it's really fun to see that you might not do everything that you want to do with this one project, but perhaps God gives life to that and multiplication to that, and things happen down the road that you're putting seeds in the ground on. And so there are, I think, 7 churches out of that network of churches in Austin now, daughters and granddaughters. And then we planted a church in Knoxville, Tennessee called Redeemer Church of Knoxville. And there are now 2 daughter churches that are active out of that, together with the Presbytery. So yeah, I worked regionally with Tennessee Valley Presbytery in planting and renewal, and then we've been in this role with M&A for about 3.5 years. It's been so fun meeting John at Covenant Seminary, just a joy there, and connecting with him and praying for him. Jay and I connecting further and deepening our connections in this time. So Craig, good to meet you. So happy for what you all are doing, John, and your initiative to do the Facebook page and all of that is such a blessing. And so thank you. I heard through Chris about this today, and I just wanted to come on and support it and encourage it and be a participant too, because my secret dream is I do want to go back and plant a church again. I really do. I got to catch up with Jay. He's on number 3, so I have to catch up on that. My other good friend Jeffrey Lancaster is on number 3, so I we'll see what God has. But thanks for letting me jump in, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
But let's kind of talk about a little bit what God is doing right now. Just in what comes first to mind if I was to ask you, how is God at work in your plant despite these circumstances? And maybe despite even who you are. But in light of a pandemic, how have you seen God's hand at work? Jay, do you have any thoughts? You are muted. Still. Oh.
Says I can't unmute myself. I know. I can't hear me. It's you.
Go ahead. I can hear you now. And you went mute again.
Okay. There? Yes?
Yep.
Are we good? Can
We
you hear
are.
me? Okay. Yeah. Well, this has been, I will say, and I'm not going to belabor the point as I want to do, but I think that the first work that God has done is a work in me, in that this church plant, as my third one, is very different than my other two. In this way, I really feel much more ironic, much more at peace with this one. I just don't feel the pressure that I did in the first two for, my fear of failure coming through, and I just really believe that this is either going to succeed or fail, and in the end, I can bring whatever I have, all the gifts that I have to the table, and Jesus is going to do something with it, no matter what. And whether or not it ends up being a thriving particular church down the road, I really, really believe that Jesus, that's up to him. And that's a really good place to be for a church planter that I wasn't, frankly, the first two. I lost lots of nights of sleep. That doesn't mean those are my good days, of course. My bad days are, I'm still stressed out and want to please people and do all those things. But really, God has done a big work in me, just in terms of really wanting to contribute to his kingdom, not worried about my own reputation and all those things that we church planters tend to worry about. So I think that God had prepared me to plant a church during a global pandemic, right? When it's super hard to get quantifiable results right now. I have to just sort of put it out there and keep going. And so that's been the biggest change. I mean, the things that we've seen are just little bitty sparks of encouragement. We were able to, before this hit in January and February, we were able to gather about 20 adults who are on our launch team. It's different from a core group, so we had a sort of different strategy, and I can talk about that later. But yeah, 20 really committed, mature believers who want to see a church here and who long to see the gospel go out in this little corner of St. Louis, and who are helping me sort of pull it off.
Yeah.
And so, and then, I mean, just in our first service last Saturday, which was horrible technology-wise, it was just, I've been trying to learn from Craig and John here about how to do it, because I hear that Instagram, that's where the young folks are going these days, right? Now it's like TikTok or something. I can't keep up with that. I can't, like, Facebook's so uncool now. But anyway, it was horrible. But you know what? Jesus was worshipped, and we had 3 people who responded right away and said, "I'm in. I want to join up." So praise God.
Were those people you were?
Nope.
I mean, was that a surprise to you?
Complete strangers to me.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're just going to keep plugging away at it until we can actually meet in person and go. So we've been encouraged little by little.
That's great. John, how's it been for you? So you've got 6 months under your belt or so, 5 months before this hit, and how is it affected, and what is it looking like right now?
Yeah. Well, just real quick. First, Jay's name is Smokin' Jay Simmons. So once I get older, I'll be smoking John St. Martin.
That's right there, baby.
And your service, I went and looked at it, has more views than like all of my services combined. So you're doing something different than I am, and hopefully you see some fruit for it. So things here are, I would say they've really stabilized. We were at a really interesting point in January. We moved to a new facility, which kind of in a lot of ways in September, I feel like was a soft launch. And really in January, we kind of went full throttle. We launched Sunday school. We just had a lot more identity of what was going on. Some new people joined our church, and felt like we had entered a new phase. And the last weekend we could meet, that Saturday we had a new members class and then on that Sunday morning we had a worship service, and then that afternoon I got an email that said we couldn't meet anymore. And so it was kind of this interesting moment where basically our church had doubled in size in terms of members. We had kind of entered into this new phase, and all of a sudden, we just had to stop. And so what's been kind of cool about that, though, is things that I would never have assumed I would have ever done, like membership interviews over Zoom. That's what I've been spending a lot of my time doing. Or, it's a lot easier to get together with a family that has 3 or 4 kids or a new baby on a Zoom call and have that conversation. We have our overseeing elders are very far away from us. So doing those session meetings, we've kind of already been doing those digitally, but all of a sudden our new norm has made some of that stuff a little bit more convenient. So I'm thankful that we got to this point where a lot of people had onboarded into our church and have really kind of dug in. And as we've been doing these new member interviews, one of the questions I said, what's the difference between an attender and a member from your perspective? What does that mean? And a lot of the responses have been, being committed, being here, especially in a time like this where we're, trying to figure out what's next and how do we hold our church together. And so it's actually kind of galvanized our people in a way that is really encouraging to see. I mean, I can't imagine taking membership vows over Zoom of a church that you just started attending for the past month. And you're like, oh, I can't promise you we're ever going to meet again. And yet, like, that's the most encouraging thing, is to see people not only, continue on in a process, but really understand some of the difficulty and it's caused them to further their commitment. The other thing is, it's kind of cool. We try to include a lot of different people in our church in terms of, volunteers. Like, that's one thing about a church plant. People can get involved right away. And on Sunday morning, we really just have one open area where people can come and help with a prayer. But what we've been doing is through Zoom, and we've been doing our worship services live. And so instead of everybody unmuting themselves during a congregational response, I've been asking people to individually kind of do each response. So the call to worship response, this family will do it, or this family or this person will do that. And so now I need 8 volunteers every Sunday. And it's pretty low bar in terms of what you have to do. You just have to say one word, one sentence or whatever it is. But it has allowed more people to be there, more people to feel like they're participating in a meaningful way on Sunday. And so as much as we're kind of in a holding pattern, waiting for this to kind of to end, I feel like it's helped our people really invest in the church. And so that's been encouraging.
Oh, that's great. And Craig, what have you seen?
Yeah. Well, we're kind of in a unique situation because I currently still live 4 hours away from my plant location. And so that was the closest church that could do a church planting residency with us. And so, so that's why we've kind of been doing the slow approach over this last year, monthly meetings, slowly building a group. We became a mission church, the Presbyterian, this last year, and slowly just growing. And it's been amazing, the growth that we've had on the ground. And it's forced our people on the ground to be really active and inviting and in outreach, because I'm not there to do it for them. And so I just kind of go there, meet with all the new people that they've introduced to me. And so I get to go and do the fun part. And we would have a monthly kind of worship service gathering, talking about the vision of the church plant. And so the original plan, the original timeline was for us to move actually like into June and keep on doing monthly, or maybe once we get there, do it a little bit more often throughout the summer and launch in September. And like I said, we've been gathering a pretty large group. And so it felt like momentum was going, so we could do that. And this is an area that I know well. I've lived there before. And so it would be pretty, I think, doable to do that. And then coronavirus hits, and then talking to some of our network leaders up here, Michael Kelly, the pastor I'm under, Nate Walker, realized that, we could start doing worship services right now. And everyone else is online, so we can be too. And we had enough people and interest on the ground that people wanted to feel that connection and that community. They were feeling lost. Some of the churches that they had been going to in the meantime weren't actually doing online things. And so, Pastor Nate was like, hey, this is an opportunity for you to pastor these people and for them to actually sense you as their pastor. And so I slowly been reaching out to every family one by one, just praying for them, reaching out to them. And so we launched online worship services. Palm Sunday was our first one. And so this Sunday, actually, I was telling them before we started, I just recorded our service for this Sunday, just before I hopped on this call. And so, I've had a chance to pastor these people. One of the cool things has been, a Sunday morning worship service, especially that's pre-recorded, you can't really tell engagement, not really. Even the numbers online, you kind of try to feel good about those numbers, but you probably shouldn't. You never know. How many times has my mom watched this, And so, it's really hard. People ask how it goes. I don't know how it goes. I'm not seeing people. And what's been great is we also started a midweek book study. So Wednesday evening, we do a Zoom book study. And there's 9 families counting us that are part of this book study. And so that's been the really encouraging part, has been seeing how God has been binding this group together, building relationship. And some of the people that were maybe like kind of one foot in, one foot out on whether or not they were going to do it are now a part of this and serving. And we have a men's discipleship group that I meet with once a week. We have a women's discipleship group starting this week, and different people leading. And so that's been the encouraging thing, is seeing people step up into different roles. And so, our hope is to continue to do this as long as we need to.
Oh, that's great. Well, good. I'm getting some questions in here. Let me just, Chris 6 asked, he says, I'm curious how the crisis is affecting fundraising among church planters. How has individual giving been affected? Are churches reluctant to consider support applications at this time? Any experience there? And anything you've noticed so far? That's, for us, the fear is probably the first one, people won't come. Second fear is people won't give. And so, it is great, especially with the video, all the clicks. I'll be interested to see what the church reports look like for attendance this next year. All of a sudden, most of the mega churches will be the churches online. But the second fear then is, are people going to give? And how? Any thoughts, any trends, any concerns that you've seen, thoughts you have?
For me, it's been a little bit different, just because, I really spent the whole fall fundraising ahead of time, so I haven't needed to rely on that. It's always good church planting strategy to try to raise your money ahead of time, so you don't have to worry about it the first few years. So we did an okay job of fundraising in the fall. St. Louis is not Austin, Texas, right, Paul? There's a huge difference in terms of people's wherewithal in the Midwest, but we did okay. We got enough to make it at least through this year and part of next. So I really have, I haven't, it really hasn't been on my radar, though I'm sure it's super difficult.
Any other thoughts that you've seen or experienced?
I think you need to unmute these
yeah.
guys. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have, kind of two aspects happening, right? We have outside fundraising that we've done. We have some internal giving that's been happening. Thankfully, we haven't had a lot of internal people who have been significantly affected by the shutdown with our economy. And at the same time, like we're not passing a basket every Sunday. So I've been trying to onboard our people onto online giving. Most of our people, I'd say 75% were already kind of there. The other 25%, we've been trying to help navigate that with them. And I'm glad we had that in place already. I know there's some churches, in fact, I think RBI came out and set up something where any PCA church that needed online giving, they'd help you set it up quick for free. So I'm thankful that we had some of that in place. I anticipate that some of our external giving will probably not come in. You ask people to give for 3 years. My assumption is that, I don't know if you looked at your 401k, but mine is, I just looked the other day and it was a depressing report. And so I kind of assume that there'll be some sort of dip there. I think the long-term fallout of the economic impact of this is going to have some sense in which even our internal giving is going to be whatever percentage down. And so I've always thought about contingency plans, and I think that's part of being a church planter is we moved to this place and we have this 5-year plan or whatever, 3-year plan or however many year plan, and when things stop lining up, you're always recalculating what that's going to look like. And so do I have to work at UPS or Starbucks or be a chaplain, or who knows what it's going to require. What I've kind of decided in my own life as I've thought about those things is the Lord has provided for us this where we're at. And I think we're probably okay for a while. We did our diligence, getting a decent amount of support before we got here. But if in a year that's gone, then that's when we'll have to ask the hard question. And I'm one that wants to hedge my bet and think, oh, I only have a year left of funding. I should try to stretch this out over 3 years. I think I've been convicted time and time again that now's the time to run. Now's the time to see what the Lord's going to do. Let's be faithful with the time we have. And when the come to Jesus moment happens with our finances, then we'll come to Jesus with our finances. So that's my answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to start selling essential oils. So if anyone wants to buy any, I'll drop a link in the thread. It's good for your skin or something. Now, I'm still in the midst of fundraising, throughout the spring, and all my fundraising events and things I was going to do got shut down, canceled. So I've been hit pretty hard by the fundraising aspect. On the ground, though, giving has picked up because now that we have a service, that might have been another ulterior motive to starting services. Because now people have, a church they can call their own, so they can start giving money to it. And so the first thing I say to someone when they commit to the church plan is I basically ask them how much they're willing to commit to, and encouraging them to give, and which is both funny and serious. So like John said, I don't really know the long-term effect, but right now we're okay. We've lost a few donors, but I'm hoping we continue to grow on the ground.
Yeah. Good. I have a question from Jeremy King. He says, through some citywide initiatives, food giveaways, etc., we've had a handful of families reach out with interest in the church plant. Then he says it's extremely difficult to have new people join a Zoom call with a bunch of strangers that already know each other. So the question is, how are you on-ramping people to your churches during this crisis? Then he says, context, don't have weekend service yet, only Thursday night prayer Bible studies. So what is on-ramping looking like as you're connecting with people?
For me, it started, sorry, you go, John.
So we do our worship service on Zoom, and I do think there's a pain threshold to like showing up on a camera with a bunch of people you don't know.
Especially if you're still in your pajamas.
That's right. And so what we've done is we live stream that service as well. Zoom has an integration. That's what we're doing right now. And so people that don't want to join our service can still watch. They can watch the next day, however they want to do that. But that's just Sunday service. We have all these other things we're trying to do. So I think the more ways people can kind of sit in the balcony in a digital way, the better. And so our small groups are about to all end their Bible studies in the next month or so. And we'll probably switch all of those then to a church-wide Bible study that will be, once again, live streamed, where people can watch it live, they can participate live, they can be in the Zoom meeting, or they can watch it after the fact, post it on YouTube or Facebook or whatever is going to happen. We have a marriage conference we're doing online. There are several people that aren't part of our church that are now on there. I've never seen their face. They don't join on video. So I think the more ways you can allow participation, like pathways towards that, recording things ahead of time, having recordings afterwards. If you're doing Zoom, maybe also live streaming it. However you can be posting make your stuff as public as is appropriate, for your emails and whatever's going out, so that people can be clicking on it in an anonymous kind of way, just like somebody might show up at a church 5 minutes late and leave 5 minutes early. How are they going to be able to do that with your content? I think that's the nut we need to crack as online megachurch pastors, as I often refer to us now.
Yeah. I think for me, it's been, the new people I've had connect with, I try to connect with them via Zoom call so they can kind of get to know me. And that makes it a lot easier for them to try to drop in. We had one brand new family that never been to one of our meetings yet pop into a Zoom. And I think they were able to be a little bit more comfortable because they knew me and they'd seen me. And so I think that would be the thing I would shoot for, is that personal connection as much as possible. If you had a ton of new people, you could do like a newcomer Zoom thing where you have everyone's new, but I don't know that we're getting that many new people at once. At least I'm not.
I've got 4 small groups. From our worship service, we're asking people. We're doing both YouTube and Facebook, and so we have two groups of our core people who are reaching out to folks as they can during the worship service and saying, hey, if you want more information, or if you just want to meet Pastor Jay or whatever, fill out this form, which is on our website. And that's where they've come. And that's where the 3 last week came from. So that was we just have choices on there. If you just want to hear more about the church, or if you want to join one of these small groups, small groups are like a normal community group where people know each other and begin on a Wednesday night sort of thing, and pray for each other. The other 2, we're doing 2 just flat out social groups, which is every other week guys pub night and every other week girls pub night. So if people are more comfortable just sort of hanging out and BYOBing it, I'm they're cheap dates, so it's pretty good. And then the last thing is a Bible study for more mature people who are just really looking and hungry for the word. And so we're doing that. So we're trying to filter those things. Here's the truth, though. I don't think like in our situation where we're just sort of out of the gate. I think that we're probably going to gather some really committed, bold people that way who can step into a situation like that, and that's okay. Those are the people you kind of want in your core group anyway. But I'm also being really, really intentional about saying in our invitations and stuff like that, if you are not a Christian, this is the perfect opportunity for you to come sit on the back row and see what we do. And you don't have to show your face. You don't have to interact at all. You can just come see what you do. So come do that. And so we're hoping that when we do go live, that will translate into people who are comfortable enough then to show up. And so we're just asking the Lord to do that.
As you're describing that, Jay, it kind of makes me think of a question. You talk about the bold people joining in and those others that are kind of coming in, as we always have, the side door,
right?
Folks coming in. What are the challenges that you can foresee possibly in the coming weeks or months that when you have the in-person, what are the positives and the challenges, the opportunities that it might afford or potential issues you might have to encounter as you move forward?
I had a quick story. I had an interaction with a guy at Aldi. I was shopping at Aldi with my mask on, and this African-American guy comes up to me. I was in a foul mood. I was sweaty and my thing was itchy on my beard and I didn't want to be there. And I was sick of this. And he came straight up to me and he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, yeah. I just want this to be over. I just want this to be over." And he looked at me and said, "You know what? I hope we never go back." I was like, "What?" He said, "I hope we never go back because more people are praying right now than ever have before." Now, he didn't know I was a pastor. And we got to talking. And it turns out that he's a pastor. And he then rebuked me he said, if wearing an uncomfortable mask is the price to pay for the salvation of many people, that is a small price to pay, brother. And I was like, amen. You're right. And so really that helped me reframe my own pity party into what the real beauty of this moment actually can be for the sake of the kingdom. And so, when you have, and I think that's the fun part about it for me. And I'm getting to the answer to your question, by the way. But the fun part about it is for me is that this is a great opportunity to reach the unchurched and the never churched because they're asking the right questions now, and so the challenge will be for those people is entering in sort of on the very base level, like we would any new convert into a church, right? And so I am anticipating we will have a group of folks who are really interested in pursuing these things once we do live. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges actually is a all at once group. I mean, it may be two people, but an all at once group of people who have questions who are finally showing up able to answer them. And so that's one part of it, but that's also the opportunity too, right? So with the people who are bold enough they're either really needy or they're really bold and love the vision and want to be a part of something new, right? And so like anything, the challenge is now in a limited way, how do we know why they want to be involved? Because as we all know, there's good reasons and bad reasons to get involved with a church plant, right? Some of the boldest people are those who really have no place else to go, maybe, or they've been burned by other places, and it's hard to get an intimate read on that via online stuff without spending some sort of face-to-face time with that. So I think that's a danger. At the same time, it also could be the exact opposite, the good reasons too, So discerning that is hard.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I just think even trying to identify the different needs and creating ministries around them, right? We're always doing that in our church functions. We're just going to do a social picnic, and that's such a low level thing you can invite friends to, right? That's like a typical church. How do you do that online? It's not going to be a picnic. It's going to be something else. There was a guy in our church planter group here that did a bar online trivia. I've yet to successfully pull that off. I want to steal your idea. It's very difficult. But like, what are the ways in which people we've met, we can invite them into an appropriate relational, connection? So, like Craig said, maybe it's just, hey, let's have a virtual coffee or have a virtual lunch. Would love to talk to you more personally or with your family, whatever that looks like. Or maybe it's more socially oriented, trivia night, whatever. However you come up with some, creativity. Every church planter has to have that kind of creative bone in their body. Christianity Explored is this evangelistic Bible study. Now they're kind of coming out saying, hey, we'll help you do that through the internet. I would never have thought of doing Christianity Explored as a Facebook Live event, but hey, that's actually a really great idea. I saw all this stuff about divorce rates going up, so we decided to do a marriage conference. There's different ways in which people are willing to engage relationally with you and with the church, and you have to figure out who are the people you're really trying to connect with, and what's one thing you can do to connect with them this week or this month, and then how do you follow up with that the next? It's the same as we do in our own churches, but now we have to do it in this weird online way. So it's a hard nut to crack, but certainly it's not a new problem. I'll put it that way.
What are you planning on doing months from now that you would never have thought you'd be doing? You've mentioned somewhat like doing some of this online, but is there anything else that coming out of this you go, yep, I'm going to continue this, or I ain't going back there? Been there, done that. I never want to have another Zoom meeting again. Whatever it might be. What are the takeaways and what are the never agains?
One of the big things
I'm in that camp, by the way. I don't want to ever do this again. So.
One of the things I've been thinking about in the future is, I wonder if this make us rethink some of the ways we do church planting, and how do we make it lean? How do we not have to spend a ton of money on doing it? And, depending on the way that these regulations come down, we still might not be able to have larger groups gathering for some time. And so one of the things I've thought about, depending on how things go, is maybe you have multiple, home churches that you have throughout a city, that you have one pastor pastoring, multiple congregations. So that's one thing I would not have thought about really doing seriously, but now with our group, that might be how we end up starting in the fall, is something closer to that. Which could be, I've heard other people use the phrase, that a new way of thinking about the parish. I think the old parish way is probably gone because of cars, but maybe there's a different way that we can reimagine what does a local communities, neighborhood communities look like. And I think those are some of the unanswered questions for me that I've been processing.
Question here from Michael Changer says, did you discuss with your leaders if online corporate worship was an actual thing and not a contradiction in terms? What was that discussion like? Were there other ideas other than doing a typical service but online? So kind of leading into it as we're talking with your leadership, was there pushback? Was there other thoughts, suggestions for you?
I don't know what you other guides, church planting oversight and support is like, but that conversation never really happened. It happened with myself in my head. As much as I do have oversight and I can ask them questions and we're engaged with one another, I very much function as an evangelist. I'm very far away from everybody else. And so as I thought about I put this in my notes to some of Chris's questions leading into this meeting, is like, your theology matters, and it's tested all the time, especially now. And for me, as I had a group of people that I've been selling on our distinctives for 2 years about the necessity of the church gathering together, like, this is what matters. And to have that, like, tangibility pulled out from under us, what does that look like now? Was a difficult question for us to answer. Us meaning multiple personalities of John in his head. But this is ultimately what we came to is, the first week I did a take home kind of like liturgy, just do this on your own. If we can't do corporate worship, at least do family worship. And then we did a live Sunday school afterwards. And I realized, I have like a pretty good amount of people in my church that are either single or their spouse isn't really worshiping with them. And the idea of telling them to like do this by themselves is a pretty high pain threshold and pretty awkward. And right, it was just 1 week. Everything is a week at a time at this point. And so the question I asked for myself was, of course, what we're doing now is not, gathered physical worship. We aren't doing communion, right? Like all of the aspects of what we ought to be doing as the church gathering together, the assembly of God's people, is not happening. So what's the best thing we can do to recreate that? What's the closest we can get? And so after that first week off, I spent that week just mulling over what are our options? How can we embody as much gathering and participation as possible? And so that's why I ended up doing the Zoom format, because I already had all these people who are participating with me. I mean, so Craig and Jay here, they're trying to gather people that haven't been gathered yet. And they're kind of in a different box. I already had people that I had gathered, and now I'm trying to hold it together, right? And so for us, the idea of everybody logging into Zoom, I can see your faces. You're unmuting yourself to do the congregational responses, and there's this sense in which each week we're trying to add extra elements in which it's participatory. This last Sunday, we finally got a musician to come to my office, and we did music live rather than pre-recorded. And I'll tell you what, unable to unmute yourself, we've already had a bunch of fumbles in this meeting. Like, those are the things that actually make it feel like it's real.
Yeah.
Like, I had the wrong music in my slideshow last Sunday that we were putting on Zoom. And then my musician's like, we're singing this song. It's like, no. Okay, it'll be a minute, fumble through a bunch of stuff. And here's the worst part. I was the only singer. People had to listen with headphones to me.
You sounded good, John. I heard it. You sounded good, man.
Oh, no. But that's the whole point. Like, the thing I've been selling to people for years now, I had to put my money where my mouth was, and I had to sing to the internet, and I had to gather on a video call. And so for me, it's certainly not the same, but at the same time, I'm striving to get as close as I possibly can to the real thing, so that my people each Sunday are feeling like, 1, this is worship. 2, I'm doing it not by myself. And 3, it's creating a longing in me for the restoration of what ought to be. And so, like, we do weekly communion when we're gathered. So I still talk about it every week in our service. So, hey, here's the time when we're supposed to be gathering together around the table. And even leaning into what I would say before communion, here's what's being represented. Here's why it's a good reminder for us. And I hope that it's causing you to hunger for it. Mm-hmm. And so when we come back together, we will have the thing that we've been missing. Mm-hmm. And so it's actually reinforcing some of the principles that we have, the commitments we have to say, hey, look, we're pretending to do it, and that we're getting pretty close, but it's still not it. And so as close as we can get, I hope that being close is still causing us to long even more for it. The analogy I often use is a soldier who's deployed, who's video chatting and sending letters and emails to his wife. Like, you still have this ongoing relationship, but there's a reason your wife and your kids are waiting for you at the airport when you get back. It's because you can't replace it with this digital format. And yet to dismiss it as being unimportant or unhelpful in the meantime is silly. And so we're going to use every means we can to continue to do the thing we're called to do. And hopefully those are the things that are reminding us time and time again of what we're really hoping to be doing. So there's my rant.
Good. Helpful. Thanks. Any other thoughts?
My temporary session was kind of split on the idea, but I'd already made a video and sent it out telling people I was going to do it. So similar to John is that I called as an evangelist, but we still have temporary sessions that help with certain things. So I think their main fear was not to create a consumeristic mindset. I don't think they'd realized all the groundwork I'd done over the last year. And so they were supportive, but they were a little bit leery. And one of the things I thought of, even in your example there, John, is that, the Apostle Paul wrote most of his letters, from a lot of his letters from prison, and he ministered to his flock from a distance. And so this is really nothing new. It's just new to us. And it's not meant to replace the real deal. I actually was realizing the Paul thing when I was writing all these emails and letters to people, and I can't wait till we meet again in person. I was like, that sounds like something Paul says,
Good.
For me, there was no choice.
Yeah.
What else was I going to do? I mean,
yeah,
really,
exactly.
it's like,
But did you have any thoughts of, I'll just postpone starting worship?
Oh yeah. But then it was like, well, what am I going to do spending this time? I mean, it could be all summer.
Yeah.
Like, am I just going to not be a church planner? Like, there's nothing else for me to do but to do this. So my temporary session was all for it. They're like, yeah, go for it. Why not? See what happens.
I will just say that Craig was a very helpful inspiration to me, being 6 months into our worship and feeling like, what are we supposed to do? And then seeing Craig's like, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and launch online. Early, I thought, oh yeah, that's totally a great idea.
Yeah, me too. Craig,
and then Jay responded and said, I'm stealing that idea. I'm going to do it too. Yeah, that's right. And I think that's honestly, this forum, our Facebook group, I hope that these conversations and seeing what other people are doing is encouraging to you. I'll tell you, a week into this, when I'm just like, we should just give up for 6 months till this is over, right? I mean, why not? We'll save money or whatever. I don't know. And then to see other people as they react to it, it's such a grace to see how God's at work in other places and other circumstances. Gets you out of your own box. Even they got, somebody, they're doing trivia and all of a sudden everybody's doing trivia. That's all we got to be doing is looking to others to fill in these voids. So.
Yeah. I mean, by its very nature, ministry can be very much alone. Church planting amps that up even more. And now this, but it is wonderful. It's been great to see on the Church Planter Facebook page and other forums that, we realize even more we're as alone as we are, we're not. And the ability to have that interconnection is there, and to be able to feed off of each other. Even, those that don't even know each other all that well, as you're across other part of the country, but having these opportunities. Well, that's good. I recently saw there was an article Ed Stetzer posted on his blog, The Exchange, and it's just this Monday. It's called "Relaunching Church: How to Seize This Moment for Your Church's Future." I'm just going to read a section. I want to kind of get your response. He says, each church is defined by key events or periods of time that have uniquely impacted the shaping of the values, beliefs, and practices that it now embodies. But then he goes on to say, but it is an exceedingly rare occasion when both people and institutions all face the same defining moment together. A moment like that calls for a courageous church leadership to become ruthlessly honest about its current state, equally frank about the conditions of the mission field, and then audacious enough to ask the most candid question of all: how should this shared moment prepare us to become Jesus's church for the present, future? Goes on then to mention about stabilizing, normalizing, mobilizing, and then futurizing, which is a strange term, but I think I know what he means. So in light of that statement, as we're kind of begin to wrap up in the next couple minutes, what would you say in answering that question? How should this shared moment prepare us to become Jesus's church for the present and the future? What is the most succinct takeaway you would have for that?
I'll be glad to jump in. I've already sort of said it, but the truth is that we church planners give a lot of airtime to non-transfer growth, and really being outward faced. But in some situations with a sizable enough core group, that's not really true. This has absolutely forcing us in every way, all of us, me and everyone else, to be completely outwardly faced. And all of us recognize the opportunity that this is at the same time. So, I'm super excited. I mean, if we survive, I'm super excited about how the wagon ruts that this is setting for our church long term, because it is going to be outward faced, because that DNA is being sown deeply in during this time right now. So we have no choice. So.
I like that image of the wagon ruts. I mean, I feel very much the same. And I mean, specifically, it's helping us to be a church of prayer. We always talk about it. You read Acts, and that's how the church expands is prayer. And I think it's for us, it's remembering that this is not a movement of me. This is not a movement of even our gathered people. This is God's church, and the gates of hell can't prevail against it. So coronavirus is not going to prevail against it. So it's making us profoundly, I think, hopeful, and helping us lean on the things that are lasting, and to let go of the things that need to be let go of, to let the chaff be, blown away. Psalm 46 has been a great meditation that, the mountains are crashing into the sea right now. The waters are foaming, but God is still there, and he is steady, and he is firm, and he wants us to be still and to know that he's God. And so that's, I think, the thing that I'm hopeful that our church in particular, our local church and the church, wide, just remembers to trust that this is not our thing, and that we can kind of strip out the things that we don't need and stick to the means of grace that he's given us to feed his people.
Preach.
Your thoughts? Again, go ahead, John.
I feel like we're in a season of where we didn't know what we had until it's gone. And it's gone
Song
now.
about that.
Yeah. And I do think that's going to shape us moving forward. I'm trying to drill that home every chance I have now. Is I don't know if and when we're ever going to get back together. I'm up to the whims of the public school district, which is not a good whim to be subject to, right? Especially as a church. And so whatever is going to happen, even now. So last week, we had some people invite family members and friends to our worship service, and it's painful to come into a Zoom meeting, but I think people are starting to get that what we're doing matters, and I'm hopeful that's going to carry forward, and and that a crisis like this is going to set the tone for especially a church plant. Is like, however we fare after this financially or whatever, if we want this to happen, if this church needs to be here, if it needs to be in St. Louis, if it needs to be in Yakima, if it needs to be wherever, like, we have to act differently. We have to do things. We have to be the agents of growth as the church. And so that's my hope, is that the removal of assumptions, of removal of what we have, has really kind of highlighted for us the need, and as we come back together, the urgency and the desire to share that is going to be much more on the front head of the mind of the people in our church.
Thank you. We're going to close. I'm going to have Paul, if you would pray and say a few words. But before that, just want to thank you guys for your time, and for those that were joining us. So glad to be able to have this opportunity. It's my hope and desire of beginning to plan out for similar events and opportunities through May. Actually, I've kind of mapped out through the rest of the year, but that's all very tentative, because I want to hear from all you guys on the Church Planter Facebook page, elsewhere. What are some things that are of interest, questions? Obviously, not just, it can be dealing with the pandemic right now. It can be dealing with anything and everything else, because we need to keep moving forward and seeing how God is going to be at work. So please feel free to write me, private message me, whatever, text me, give me a call. Want to be able to keep these kind of conversations going in different ways. Paul, do you have any thoughts? And then if you'd close us in prayer.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, John, and the Facebook group. Thanks, Chris and Next Gen, for putting this on. What an encouragement. So thankful for all who are listening in or who will check this out a bit later. I'm listening to these great guys in the field right now, and the commonalities I'm hearing, one are, we're really boiling this down to what is the church, and we are a community of celebrating Jesus and what he's doing in our midst. So the threads I've heard, like for Jay and Craig, it actually got worship started sooner than it would have otherwise, the COVID world. For John, you're being creative with how you're doing membership interviews and connecting people and saying, we want you to be all in. We don't know all that all in will mean, but we want you to be all in as a member, and we're all in with you. I love the creativity here, and even the movement forward here that this crisis has caused. So I think celebrating that and Jesus' goodness in that. I think what else is the church? We're authentic. So I think, John, it's great to say, don't know when we're going to meet again. Don't know what our world is going to look like. Don't know what your finances are going to look like, or our collective finances. Don't know, but we want, as Jay was saying, people who are all in and want to come bear witness to Jesus. And I love what I'm hearing in that. So it's a privilege to really shuck it all down and be authentic. And I think people are just yearning for that and longing for that in general. And then I love the creativity on display here. As PCA people, we can often minor on creativity, when I think God and the gospel majors on creativity. And so I just applaud all of you. I look forward to continuing to hear more, on the page and on these webinars and elsewhere about the creativity that is out there in plants or established churches. And I want to applaud you for that. And we're praying for you in that and cheering for you in that, and here to help with you in that in any way that we can. Thank you, Chris, for letting me jump in. And you ready to close in prayer? Is that a good spot? You want to do that?
If you would, that would be great.
Good. Father, thanks for the time. Thanks for the wonder that you reign, Jesus, as risen and ascended Lord, that you are building your church, that you love since the very first century, since the very first days after your resurrection and ascension, to build your church through church planting. Thank you for these plants in Fargo, in St. Louis, and in Yakima. Lord, thank you for all the other plants represented here on this live stream and folks who may listen in later. Lord, please continue to grow your church. Give us a celebrating heart and way together. Give us an authentic and humble life together. Give us a creative way to be and do church together, Lord. Always clinging to your means of grace, always knowing things will center around words, prayer, and sacraments, but embodying that and living that out and going forward from that in creative ways. So, Lord, bless this time now. Bless us as we go forward. Thanks for Chris and his leadership here for us. And we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank
and
you,
hopefully
guys.
we'll
Thank you.
see you
Thank
later.
Chris. Okay, thank you.
All right, see you guys.
God bless all.
All right. Thank you.